that you, 1 second. Okay, so hello everybody, good morning. Today we are marking Yom HaZikaron in Israel, so we are going to stop this class in 15 minutes, and whoever wants will go to Betzalel with a Tehillim and say Tehillim over there for the siren. So we're going to give everybody a little bit of chance. That doesn't make sense. A little bit of chance. I am literally losing my English. It's ridiculous. We're going to give everybody a chance to get over there with the Tehillim so you're not rushing like a crazy person. So I will do the rushing here and I will talk and then we're going to come back afterwards and we're going to finish class. Yes, because in 15 minutes, we're not actually going to be able to do very much for this class, believe it or not. So this week's Parsha, we have a double header. It is Parsha's Tazria and Metzora that we are learning this week. It starts from chapter 12 in Chumash Vayikra. We have a page number 609. What do you have? 608, 609 in the big blue Chumashim. If you have a different Chumash, then you have a different page, and I can't help you with that. Okay, what is Parsha? What are they talking about? These Tazria and Metzora Parshas that are going together. So it starts off in the beginning of Parsha's Tazria, So not so much Nida, that's going to come later on, but it's going to start off with a woman who gives birth. Okay, so the woman who Tazria, when she gives birth, and she's going to have a male child. We learn three things about this. First of all, in verse 3, it tells us Uviyom Hashmini Yimol Basar Arlaso, that on the 8th day, what do we need to do? Circumcise the baby, right? The baby, the official mitzvah of circumcision is right here in our parsha, and then it goes into different laws concerning. Okay, let me preface for a second. Tazria and Metzora are going to deal with laws of Tuma and Tahara, which we've spoken about before, that Tuma, the longer translation for Tuma is inaccessible to holiness, and a longer translation for Tahara is accessible to holiness. And we're going to use the Hebrew words because the way they're generally translated feels like it has a judgment call, and it's not a judgment call. It's just, are you available to holiness or not? The next thing that the Torah, I remember to put it in here because the next thing the Torah is going to talk about is that after a woman gives birth, she's going to be in a state of tumah, and she will not be able to go to the temple for 33 days. Okay? And if she has a girl, which is in verse 5, if she has a girl, then she will be she has the first of the regular her Mida period of having bodily emission that is blood related. That sounds really terrible, but I don't know how to say it in any other way. I mean, it's this is what it is. She had gave birth, and then she's going to have for 66 days she will have this. She will be in a state of tumah, and she will not be able to go to the Beis Hamikdash. She will not be able to go to the temple or to the tabernacle in order to bring her sacrifices. Okay? Generally speaking, after a woman would give birth in temple times, you would want to give a thanks offering. Probably, thank you, God, we all lived through this experience. I know in 2021, it doesn't seem to be like such a big thing to say thank you for, even though it really is. But back in biblical times, the fact that you would have lived through the experience was definitely Thanksgiving worthy. And also they say that the woman would probably also have to bring a chatas, a sin offering, for anything that she would have said during birth, oaths that she would have made, or things she would have said that she maybe afterwards would regret, like, you never can come next to me ever again, things like that. So yes, you would also bring a chatas offering that's for forgiveness. Yes, Juliana.
I was just saying that we were told that it was just a sin offering.
No, so
it wasn't also, but it wasn't.
No, so I'm saying you could. A Thanksgiving offering is never mandated. It's always a voluntary thing. I could tell you have to atone for something you do. I can't tell you have to be grateful. I could foster a sense of gratefulness, but I would definitely. I mean, if I had a chance to bring a Thanksgiving offering for having given birth to a live child, I would jump at the opportunity. Okay. And then it talks about what kind of sacrifice she would bring. and then she would become tahora. Now, we spoke about this also a little bit, but I do want to mention again that except for Kohanim, regular people do not have an obligation to live in a state of tahara. They do not. Yes, so I don't like using purity and impurity because it always feels like a judgment call. But tahara means, can I access holiness? Can I come? So a Kohen who has to work in the temple or the tabernacle or in temple times, eat gifts that are given to them by other Jews, which is going to happen even if you're not in the temple, right? The challah and blah, 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 all those gifts that they get can only be done in a state of tahara. So Kohanim actually have a mandate to always stay in a state of tahara. Regular people did not have that obligation. There were people who always tried to stay in a state of tahara, so that they were very careful about what they ate, because if something was handled by somebody who was in a state of tumah, that would transfer to the food and blah, blah, blah. Now, all this to us sounds like almost as weird as kaparas. Huh?
Like, after you give
Also,
birth to a child, you're like, that's a lot of work.
Well, you don't have to bring it right away at that point, but you couldn't bring it before then.
Like,
Which part is a lot of work?
Giving birth is so much work, and then taking care of your baby is so much work.
Correct. What other things do you have to do? You have to, you know what there's no. So all they're saying about the sacrifice is that you can't bring them before a certain time. You don't have, in general, it's just interesting to note, because when the temple's rebuilt, and we're going to need to know this information, whenever you have a sacrifice obligations, you have a year to fulfill your obligation. You have the full cycle of the Shalosh Regalim, of the 3 festivals. So it's not like, oh my gosh, I have a tiny baby who isn't sleeping through the night, and I have to go to Jerusalem, I can cry. No, you have to, you have a year really to fulfill your obligations. But the point that Torah is making is that you can't do it before. That this person cannot bring a sacrifice before. What do you mean?
Sacrifice obligation.
Like one chatas for different things?
Yeah.
So I don't know which can and can't be combined. I would imagine.
You can make one trip to Jerusalem.
Yes, you can make one trip to Jerusalem and bring 10 animals, or buy them in Jerusalem. You don't have to schlep your animals with you. Yes, you don't have to make a separate trip for each sacrifice that you want to bring, which is why the Shalosh Regalim, those times when people came, it was really all hands on deck. They needed everybody, all the Kohanim, to be working because everybody was coming. Like it was, to us today, travel is such an easy thing. We don't think of it in terms of how hard it would have been to come from Tzfat to Jerusalem where there are no roads. Like it's not just like an annoying 4-hour bus ride in traffic. It's a longer trip. And when you're in agricultural society, taking that much time in agricultural times is like a little bit complicated. So people would sort of definitely combine bringing sacrifices. I don't know which sacrifices you could combine. I would guess, I'm 100% making this up, you do not have to agree with me. I would guess that a chatas sacrifice, a sin offering that you're going to bring, you could not combine. But a thank you offering, you probably could combine. Like that would be my sense of the situation, but that's not actually based on anything except my common sense, which, either it is or it isn't. So that's that. Okay. And then we go into chapter 13, opens up with a conversation about what's called tsaras. Okay. Tsaras is very poorly translated as leprosy. Okay. The reason that tsaras is not leprosy is because leprosy is an actually very super contagious skin disease, and tsaras is not that. And interesting factoid, in Jerusalem, there was a leper colony, and it was close to where we used to be, and like in Katamon over there. And we would walk by, and it has these like big walls, and it looks really like something out of like a bad book. It has overgrown vines over the tops of the things, and it was a leper colony that was actually active till, I wouldn't say very recently, but in the last, even in the years of the state, it was, I think, people who had leprosy, they would kind of put them there. They would put them all together and let them all, stay there and infect each other. It's a museum?
Yeah,
an art museum?
Yeah.
Cool. That's one way to transfer it.
That's so sad.
life before penicillin and basic medical knowledge was very sad.
You can feel leprosy.
What?
You can feel leprosy.
I don't
Leprechaun?
in what no leper colonies in first world countries you don't really hear about it.
Yeah, so I mean not worldwide.
So I'm saying world I don't think it's eradicated. I think it's still extremely contagious.
Yeah, at least like in the United States, like when you hear about leprechaun, it's all like the 1900s.
Right,
or earlier.
right. So
Is this also the past the things on the wall?
okay, so we're gonna get to that in a second. Yeah, it's the same. Well, it is and it isn't. Okay, so without going into many of the details, because many of the details are kind of not so, they're a little bit squeamishy kind of details. So basically, the Torah starts and talks about what happens if Adam kiyeh be'or b'saro, a person who has on their skin se'es or sapachat or beheret, and I would venture to say that your Chumash does not translate those words. Am I right? Does it translate those words? Bet, chapter 13, verse 2. Yeah, right? It doesn't translate that, right? Anytime you have a word like, I have no idea what that is, it's a transliteration. So right, so it's right. So they're not actually going to translate them because they're basically shades of white that we don't really know. The Rambam translates them as the brightest being white as snow, and the dullest version being like egg white. And so if anybody here ever bought white paint or look at white paint samples, she was like, yes. How many options of white paint are there? Pages and pages, right? There's a lot. So right. So I'm just saying, like, when you say white, it's not one color. So Torah here is highlighting 4 different colors. One, they say, the Rambam says is comparable to snow white. One is like clean sheep's wool. I forgot what the third one is. And the dullest color is like egg white. And the conversation is what happens if a person has some kind of random, clearly looks like a dead patch of skin, versions of white. We know that white is usually not a healthy skin color. We're not talking about pink white. We're talking about like those shades of white are not considered healthy colors. And then what happens with it? And so he's saying it's a negatzaras, and he's brought to Aaron HaKohen, echad mibanav HaKohanim. He's brought to Aaron, and the Kohen is going to see the nega. He's going to see this. He's going to see this affliction on his skin, and he's going to check. And he's going to check it out, and then the Kohen is going to see it, and he's going to time oso. He's going to make him impure. He's going to make him tameh. Now, the Torah is going to continue and discuss at great length different versions of this affliction. And then, as Sylvie pointed out, it will talk about you could get such an affliction on clothing, natural materials. So you could get it on clothing made of linen or wool or cotton or leather. Obviously, polyester and synthetics were not like Torah fabric, so it isn't there, but it's talking about live, like things that are kind of, based on live materials. They aren't alive. I know your cotton is not alive, but it comes from a living, growing source. So you could get some version, not the exact same, but you could get some version of tzarat on your clothing. And as Sylvie pointed out also, it could also have something that shows up on the walls of your house, on the stone walls of your house. You could, in fact, have tzarat. Okay. Now, I don't want to get into this. I want to pause. Okay. I want to pause for a second here. Can I do this? One second. Back to Parsha. It's like a little bit of a shift now. Like we come back into Parsha. So I want to talk about a few things. First of all, I want to just go back to the beginning, chapter 13, verse 2. And it tells us Adam kiyeh be'or b'saro, and then it has eight, and all those words that they're not translating, right? What do we know about the word Adam, which means a person, not as Adam, but as a person? Anybody? What?
Isn't it like one of the different views of the person who is from?
Yes, so we have a few words that are used to describe a person: Adam, Ish, Enosh, Gever. And Adam is, I think everyone, I don't know. Adam is one of the like very high names. When you talk about someone who's an Adam, you're talking about somebody who is an elevated person. They're not like a slouch someplace. They're like an Adam. They're like a person of substance. And so now we say, wait a second, somebody who's an Adam is going to get you're going to get tzara. You're going to get this type of affliction. So two things I want to say. First of all, that's the only kind of person who can possibly get this, right? We all know people who are allergic to certain things. If you eat, as a random example, wheat, you're going to get a reaction to it, right? Somebody who is not sensitive to it will not get a reaction. Here we have Adam, somebody who is a spiritually sensitive person, is going to have a reaction to the sin that will cause tzara. Okay, so that's one thing that I want to point out. And the other thing that I want to point out is that it's ba'or b'saro. It's only it's skin deep. It's very often like with a modern medical situation. If you have something showing up on your skin, your dermatologist will tell you that it's a reflection or could be something, your holistic practitioner, probably more than your dermatologist, will tell you that it's, your stress or your, all of us know about this. You haven't slept. There's some other internal thing that's happening that's coming out. That's not the story with tzara. Tzara is something that it's only on the surface. It's something that isn't a deep issue. It's something that for this person is really only surface, but at the same time, because they're a spiritually sensitive person, it's going to show up it's going to show up and it's going to have an impact on them. And the question that we want to know, and the sages ask, well, what kind of things cause tsaras? Okay, so anybody know what's the number one answer given to what causes tsaras? Lashon hara, right? Lashon hara is the actual number one answer given. There is also other answers given. You wouldn't expect us to have only one answer. What causes something? Only one answer. No. Is it a place of stinginess? Is it a place of arrogance? Is it a place of there's a whole bunch of things. The Gemara gives like a list of 5 or 6 or 8 things. I don't remember exactly. So like from
all kind of included in Lashon Hara,
though. Yes and no, maybe, but like I'm not talking about the like. It's so funny because like if you look at what is like I don't know if it still is, and I'm definitely dating myself, but what's one of the you bring for tzaras is you're doing, or that's your place of atonement that's going to be coming through birds. So it's like when we think of lashon hara, forget about the stinginess and the arrogance and everything else as outgrowths of there's them as outgrowths of lashon hara. And you could also be arrogant and not talk lashon hara, right? But we unfortunately are not spiritually sensitive people who will have an outbreak on us if we speak lashon hara. Like, unfortunately, that's just not where we are spiritually. So the first thing that I want to say is that the person, it's not something that we have today. It's if it is, we'd all be walking around very, very white. Right? Whiter than you, like dead skin white, like not just white girl white. So the first thing is that there's a place that we're really not spiritually sensitive enough to get it. So that's, a plus and a minus that we don't have it. The other thing that's very interesting is, and they talk about it a lot in Chassidus, is that you need to have a Kohen to call it tzaras. The Kohen has to actually make a person tameh. And what's very, very interesting that the Talmud points out, that in verse 3, it says that the Kohen sees the nega, and he sees that it's deep and all the things, and the Kohen sees him and he makes him impure. So the Talmud says, why do you need to have CC? He sees the thing, he sees the lesion or whatever. That's a good word. Lesion's a nice word. He sees the lesion, he sees that it's saras, and then he sees him and then he makes him impure. Okay, he makes him tameh. So the Gemara is like, what? What's the extra language? You hear where the extra language question is coming in? So the Talmud tells us that saras is not a medical condition. So therefore, we need to look at the person in their real life and say, do I have to look at this? Does the Kohen, as soon as the Kohen sees it and he has to call it, do I have to look? And the Talmud tells us we don't look at lesions at different times. So for example, if Ola Regel, people come for Pesach to the Beis HaMikdash, the Kohen does not see, I think it's saras. My neighbor who's an expert is sure it's saras. The Kohen does not have to look. He can say, sorry, I'm out celebrating with my family, we're on a Chalamoid trip, come to us after Chag. We do not have to start the process with this person now. You can do it, he can do it afterwards. The same thing till 11:30. Okay? Thank you. And he also, the Talmud tells us that in a couple that just got married, let's say a couple got married and one of them come out with symptoms of saras, the Kohen does not look at the bride or the groom for the entire, whoever obviously has it, for the entire week of Sheva Brachot. We do not interfere with their simcha for this. She can get married. Yeah. Let's say they're saying, what if it came out right after they got married? They do not.
On her.
If it came out on her or on him, the Kohen does not look at them during Sheva Brachot. Now, if this was a medical condition, right, you can't say, oh, well, just let this person walk around the temple, while thousands of people are there. It's not a medical condition. It is not a contagious condition. It is a physical manifestation of a spiritual issue. And so therefore it's not contagious. If the person in that time will do any kind of inner work, then it could be that it will go away. But we do not say that at this time, in the middle of your Sheva Brachot, you're here for the holidays, we're going to put you into isolation. Because what's the first step for tzaras? We isolate the person. And we isolate them so much, they don't have leper colonies. They're not allowed, obviously, they're not allowed to come into the temple, obviously. They're also, if you remember, in the camp, the tabernacle, around the tabernacle was the camp of the Levites, and around it was the camp of the Israelites, which in Israel is comparable to being the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, Jerusalem and out of Jerusalem. And the Metzora, the person who has Sarat, has to go out of all of those camps. He obviously can't come to the temple or the tabernacle, but he also can't go to the camp of the Levites. He can't go to the camp of the Israelites. He can't sit with other Metzorim. He cannot sit with other people who have Sarat. He has to be Badod Yeshev. He sits by himself, no Wi-Fi, no phones, and he has to really introspect and say, wait a second, where did I go wrong? And the Kohen comes after a week, checks it again, and sees, has it spread, has it developed? Can we now call it as Sarah? Like if it's a question, then the person goes into isolation for a week, checks it after another week, checks it possibly after a third week. If it actually develops into Sarah, then he has to go through the purification process, and it might clear up and it might stop by itself. It means because it's a physical manifestation of a spiritual thing, if I change my spiritual makeup, if I sit by myself and I listen and I say, wait a second, I was out of line. I did the wrong thing. I made a mistake, blah, blah, blah. Then it could change because that's the point of the whole point. You actually introspect and you should change. And Chassidus highlights the fact that there's a Kohen that starts the Tuma process, because that will start the purification process. Because the Kohen in the Chumash is called Isha Chesed. The bracha to Levi is Tumecha B'Urechel Ish Chasidecha. That my breastplate and my garments were given to the person of Chesed, who's kindness, Before I can tell somebody, you can't be part of this people, you have to sit away from everybody, isolated from everybody, on your own, by yourself, with nobody around you. I have to really be careful and say, is this coming from a place of chesed? Is this coming from a place of trying to help? Or is this coming from like my anger issues or my control issues or my things? So for the Kohen over there, we don't have tzaras today, but for all of us today, when we look at another person and we want to say, you don't belong, you don't fit in, we need to ask ourselves, where is that coming from? Is it before we, want to rip a person down? We never do. I know we all just love everybody. We never want to say nasty things about anybody. We don't inadvertently, but let's say we sometimes do. Is it really, are we saying this to somebody because we want to help them, or because our mean streak is getting the better of us? So then that's a different conversation that's going on over here. Juliana, did you have a question I didn't get to you?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, like, how long they normally stay for, but if it's internal, then,
What do you
if Sarah is a reflection of what's going on internally, then does it,
It changes.
so like, if you don't change, it's just gonna be forever, and then if you do, then it grows.
Well, I'll tell you what the thing is. I think most of us, we don't make changes that we know we need to make because we aren't paying attention. We're distracting ourselves with other things, and therefore we convince ourselves that this issue isn't really an issue. It's not so bad. It's not so big thing. The Kohen says to this person, dude, you have issues that you need to deal with, and you're going to be by yourself until you figure it out. And I'm going to come back. Here's your space. We'll get you some food. We'll get you whatever you need, but you're there for a week by yourself. You can't talk to anybody. You can't distract yourself with all the things that we normally distract ourselves with. So how stubborn are we going to really be and not face our issues? So the truth is, the Kohen comes back after a week. It either has gotten worse, so that means I've accepted, I'm moving, I'm working on the process of purification, or I'm still holding on to it, and you get kind of shut up for another week, and then I think it could even go to 3 weeks. And I think really, I don't know that this is something that would go on, and so you couldn't just live with the issue because you have nothing else to distract you. You can't just say like, oh, I'll just go party, I'll just go da 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 da. It's a very in your face kind of situation that's happening. And the other thing, and I want to kind of tap into like what Sylvie brought up, is that tzaras, the Torah tells us tzaras in the forms of like a person, and then clothing, and then house. So when a house gets tzaras, there are two possible answers. One is when the Jewish people came to the land of Canaan, as it was then called, Hashem put a lot of the houses ended up having tzaras on them, and when they moved in, they found this tzaras. So they had to. The way you deal with tzaras in a house is that you have to take off the stones that are contaminated, move them out of the city, and clean the space and wait, and then come back. Right?
Why wouldn't they just like knock them?
What's that? Because it's not so easy. It's to us it's like everything's very, very, put up some sheetrock and it's gonna be fine. When you have a house that's built of stone in one corner, not that any of us would know about, like a corner that might have mold or something, right? You don't want to knock down the whole house because of one little corner. So Rashi says that the Canaanites had hidden treasures in their walls, and so when the houses got tzaras and they opened up the stones to remove the contaminated stones, they found these incredible treasures that the Canaanites had hidden in the walls, assuming, the Jews are going to come, they'll come and go, and then we'll come back and we'll get our stuff again. And then they were exposed to these treasures. That was like a one-shot deal, which parenthetically, it's interesting because in Chassidus it talks about the idea like the place of coming into a place of not holiness, right, of not Kedusha. Sometimes it's just enough for us to move in, to bring holiness in, to put a mezuzah on the door, to bring Shabbos into the house. And that's enough to transform space from a not Kedusha space. sometimes it's a much deeper, are in this, it takes a stronger kind of person or personality to deal with a stronger form of not holiness, because that not holiness would be manifest as tsaras on the walls. And then it's a longer, more involved process. It's not just taking the things out, but actually doing the avodah to correct it. And then you have a bigger reward for it. But that was like a one shot. Did that make any sense when it came out of my mouth? Totally made sense in my head. Yeah? Okay. And that was one thing. But that was, Rashi says, was a one shot deal. When the Jews come into the land of Canaan, that was like a gift given to the people. But in general, when tsaras happened, you would first have it happen to the walls of the house. It first came on the house. And what happens when something happens on the walls of the house? Everybody who lives in the house has a chance now to say, maybe I need to look into my behavior a little bit. Maybe I need to see how I'm acting, right? But we also have the ability to say, not my problem. Look how many of us live in one house. It's not my issue. And what would happen then was that the Kohen would, if they thought there was tsaras, they would actually take all their things out of the house, because anything that was in the house when the Kohen called it tameh would become tameh. So that's why the Talmud says that it was a punishment for stinginess, because like, oh, your neighbor's like, oh, can I borrow blah blah, and you're like, oh, I don't have any. And then all of a sudden it's out there in the front lawn for everybody to see. Oh, right, you didn't have it, right. So the first thing is like, can we blame it on everybody? Now, what happens if nobody gets the message? Then the next place that tsaras is going to show up is on clothing. Now, clothing is already a little bit more personal. This is my stuff, but you borrowed it. And it's, somebody else could have used it, and that still gives the person the chance to disown their issue. It's not my thing. It's really, yes, it's my sweater, but, everybody in the house has worn this sweater at one point or another, and who says it's my issue? Once it comes to your skin, it's like, this is your issue. You really need to deal with it. You can't just evade responsibility. You have to really see, how do I become a better person? That's the point. The whole point is that we should take learning cues, and we should become better people because of them. And that's really what the whole Tazria Metzora process is. It's talking about about facing things that are uncomfortable at best, and things that we're doing not so good, and to be able to say, can I do better? I am capable of doing better. Do I want to do better? And the place of the Kohen, of being this, coming from a place of chesed, is that we are aided to become better by somebody who really has our best interests at heart. There's a lot more. Guess what? Shocking enough, but we are in fact out of time. So I want to give us a bracha that we look at ourselves honestly, but with love, and be able to say, what is it that I need to tweak? What is it that I don't need to go into isolation in order to fix my situation, or what is it that I want to use the power of a Kohen and love to look at myself and be able to have something get a little bit better. Have an awesome rest of the day. This learning was in memory of all, for Yom HaZikaron, it was definitely in memory of everybody. And whoever lives, and unfortunately sometimes many people died for Eretz Yisrael, their neshamas should have an aliyah. They should be blessed with only good for them, for their families, and for all of us who